Good evening and welcome to Night Markets. This evening I'm joined by a friend and collaborator, Dr. Morne Mostert, who spends a lot of time thinking about mindset. This evening we're going to be talking about what a family mindset could look like and how relevant that is when we want to talk about family strategy. Morne, welcome to Night Markets.
Great to be with you, Gerrit.
Morne, and I think perhaps one of the biggest things to call here is why all of this.
Yeah.
You know, it's less effortful to just focus on investments and just to focus on financial performance, which that needs to happen anyway. It's very uncomfortable to start thinking about the family organization in itself and to actually commit to sort of that level of introspection.
Yeah.
So I have to ask why.
Yeah.
And I also want to answer why.
Yes.
One of the outcomes, the positive outcomes of pro-family behavior is having the ability to stimulate what we can call cooperative behavior. If the family does not firstly organize as a family, we just went through COVID. What does that look like if we aren't on the same page?
Yeah.
If we don't have sort of a reasonable goal alignment, if we cannot work together?
Yeah.
And really think about that. So I almost want to say there's this opportunity for corrective learning experience.
Yeah.
And the first step to behavioral change is acceptance.
Right.
So not all families are getting this wrong.
Yeah.
It's just statistically, again, credible numbers. If we have to look at the sort of enterprises which underpin sort of the global economy, I think 70% of leading enterprises are family owned.
It's an incredible number.
These are businesses like Lego, Samsung, LVMH. The list goes on. So the relevance of this is truly profound.
Yeah.
And yet we are continuing to. I want to explain to you how real this is. Working definition, but family enterprise, loosely for the purpose of this conversation, defined as the family has the ability to hire and fire the CEO. So we're talking about a serious decision-making responsibility, right?
Yeah.
But if the space, if the environment, the family environment is not conducive to decision-making, which is pro-family,
Yes.
you can appreciate the potential negative impact on a global scale of continuing to function this way in dysfunction.
Yes. In fact, there's so much fascinating work about why those incredible companies have survived very often for so long and have become these legacy family institutions. And it really is a form of murmuring. It is a kind of intuitive pro-family decision-making. It's not blind in the sense that it's not making use of discernment in decision-making. It's important in mindset that we're not arguing that everyone needs the same mindset. We need a diversity of mindset.
Exactly.
But we do need mindset that is compatible and that is complementary to the greater family. Of course, as families expand exponentially through generations and new members join, of course, it's not possible to have a singular mindset. But in fact, you don't want that. You want it to be enriched. But nevertheless, if you don't know what the family mindset is in the first place, you cannot make pro-family decisions in a healthy, constructive, future-oriented way, and you will not get pro-family behavior. And we also see the destruction of families who do not get it right around the world. So we can now, for the first time, articulate and define exactly the mindset of a particular group, social system, family. Just for interest, the Mindset Index has over 16.7 million permutations in a collective mindset. So a family mindset is as unique as an individual fingerprint. Wouldn't you rather know what that is?
Exactly. And Morne, I think for me, the big word here, the big point that we need to address here, I want to be very literal and say it's the topic to dovetail into right now, is affinity. And if you think about what the central metaphor in this conversation is, the murmuration, the thing, that keeps it together is a sense of affinity.
Yeah.
So if you think about what pro-family behavior will enable, it is affinity. And more importantly, exactly what you just touched on is the idea is not to sort of brainwash the family and think that you can impose a mindset on 6 or 12 individuals. That again is as unrealistic as not exploring mindset and expecting pro-family behavior.
Yeah.
But what you want to do is you want to develop agency.
Yeah.
But understand that this all comes to naught without having goal alignment. And how do we arrive at goal alignment? We arrive at goal alignment because we understand it's in our interest to cooperate and to develop a level of functionality which is realistic to our context. But we can only get there if we firstly get on the same page.
I think that's exactly right. So perhaps I can talk a little bit about the dimensions of such a mindset index, and agency is one of them.
Yes.
And the sort of dilemma there for many groups like families is if you give complete individual agency to everybody, the thing shatters. It goes off in 1,000 different directions.
Sure.
If you give no agency to anybody, the thing dies. It's what they call in physics entropy. It dies because of a lack of energy.
Yeah.
So what you're really looking for is coming to terms with what would be the meaning of family agency.
Yes.
And that's an example of pro-family behavior. That's different from individual agency. It doesn't mean, again, you will have zero individual agency, but it means understanding your own agency in the context of the family. Some of the other dimensions in the mindset index, in addition to agency, is people. Well, we cannot define a family without the sometimes annoying presence of other humans. So if you don't have a view of how the people view people, you have no idea of how people view family.
Exactly.
Then we look at knowledge processing. What is, it sounds a bit technical. The question is, what is valid knowledge? So, for example, is it automatically valid if the founder of the so-called well-known founder of the family says something? Well, there's wisdom in that, no doubt. But of course, the context also shifts.
Yep.
And so finding that informed discernment of what do we decide is valid, acceptable knowledge is an important dimension of this. In addition to that, then, expectation. This means, what do you think the next generation of this family is going to be? A very simple example of this is optimism versus pessimism. Is it all becoming naught, as you said? Is it all becoming Zimbabwe? Or do we have a longer-term, multi-generational, pro-family expectation? Right. And then just one or two more. The next is growth. How do we think of growth? What does growth mean? Does it simply mean expansion? Does it mean anyone can join? Is that okay for growth? Or is there something that defines the mindset of the family that guides the way that we grow? And then enactment. How do you believe things happen? How do things work in reality, in practice? You know, Gerrit, I've been accused of many things, but seldom of being a practical man. And then finally, reality. So do you remain close to the dominant giga shifts happening on the planet? And can your family enterprise be resilient in the face of those? Or are you basing the future of your family on an entirely unrealistic set of ideas? So those dimensions give the architecture to the mindset index, and having an insight into each one of them about how they operate in your family will help you to make different kinds of decisions and will give you pro-family behavior.
So I think that is an excellent way to view the challenge or the challenges. One of the big development areas we see in families is a family office or multi-family office is typically engaged to provide the solution, to provide the roadmap. Okay? Please assist us with defining and developing a succession plan.
Sure.
But here's the missing link. You can't plan where you want to go on holiday. You can't plan, you have an idea of the destination. You can't sort of start plotting out that roadmap if you don't understand your starting position.
Yes.
And I think that's really what this conversation is. I've referred to it as getting onto the same page, but it's really defining what the starting position looks like. Morne, I'll give you a quick example. So as you know, I've got one foot in academia, in research, and I've got one foot in the commercial world as a family office professional. So that really allows me to work on research like this collaboration we are doing together, but also to have real world exposure to try and test. Would you believe me if I told you that some of the most brutal arguments, I'm talking about energy in meetings, family meetings that I have been exposed to, is about my brother can fly business class, I had to fly economy. This is what's getting energy in meetings, not typically, but a lot of the time. There's this, one of the problems that we have is almost this perceived inequitability. And what that then drives, if we are talking pro-family behavior, is, I almost want to say contra family behavior. What you're getting at the end of the day, and I believe the cool kids call it FOMO, is something like this is a very real stumbling block. And because we are not able to understand, typically, when speaking in the context of family here, if we are not able to understand relevant roles, if we are not able to understand ourselves as members of this thing, we sweat the small stuff. Where what you're basically getting at now is, in talking about the destination, is local scale versus global scale cooperation. And we are unable to cooperate if we don't understand how to view cooperation.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. And I love that that practical example, because the Mindset Index actually has been developed over many years, but comes out of practice, doesn't start with theory. Comes out of, as we say in academia, it's empirical. Because as I was doing this work all around the world, whether it was in Paris or London or Geneva or Rome, or in Tanzania, I should say, or Uganda or Rwanda or, Botswana or Lesotho, it became clear to me that similar debates arose in these sessions I was having with senior people in large organizations. And eventually I started realizing there are patterns.
Yes.
There are patterns.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing over and over again. Now, systems have a degree of uniqueness. I've alluded to the fact that there are over 16.7 million permutations on the Mindset Index, but there are also some universal elements. So what happened, just to explain the construction of this,
please.
Is that with some colleagues, I then started to encode these dominant themes, and we then tested that back to the market, going back to Rome and say, does this work? And so to give you an example, it's a very practical example. So inside those 7 domains I've illustrated are 24 dimensions. It all gets very complicated, but it gives you that individual fingerprint of your family DNA mindset. One of those is the very simple mindset divergence on individualism and communalism. Individualism, I believe, winner takes all. If I can argue the loudest in the meeting, if I can convince the other members of the family and I win, well, good for me. And good luck to the others. Communalism, it's about the unit. Now, of course, there's a balance to be struck. Who was it? Perhaps Jean-Paul Sartre, who said, no one can take a bath on your behalf. There is a kind of, it might have been Woody Allen, actually. There's a sort of inevitable individualism. But if you go off the charts, which you can measure with the Mindset Index, if you go off the chart individualistic, you cannot get pro-community behavior.
No.
So that's just one example, and there are 23 others of those that have come up again and again and again. When humans come together, they have divergent mindsets.
Yes.
making decisions without knowing what those mindsets are cannot possibly get you alignment on where the family would like to go.
Absolutely not. Morne, it probably comes as no surprise to you that people generally want to climb in on the decision-making level.
Yeah.
We are already deciding because the ship is moving.
Yeah.
What we are effectively saying is, yes, there's no denying this. Families are making decisions with serious financial consequences in real time today.
Yes.
But what we are saying is, even though it is effortful, understand your responsibility or ignore it at your peril, really.
Yes.
To understand what is informing those decisions.
It's such a great observation. I work a lot in strategy and longer-term strategic foresight. And very often we get a little bit of resistance. People say, well, we're in this business and we're a unique business and we make our decisions and that's the way we work and what's all this theoretical nonsense?
Yeah.
Here's what we find when they often sit up and listen. When we say, okay, you're a brilliant business, you're a brilliant family. Let us just imagine that there's another business in your sector. Right. And you decide to avoid the science behind decision-making and strategic thinking and strategic foresight, and they decide to embrace it. Where would you invest your money? In which one of the two? The one that's flying blind? Or the one that has discernment in the way they think about decision-making by using methodologies like the Mindset Index? And then very often people say, aha, comparatively speaking. So if you apply this to a family context, let's imagine you visualize, using futures thinking now, the family 3 generations from today. And you visualize that family in 2 scenarios. In one scenario, the family flies blind. We've always done it like this. We'll keep going like this. I'm an individual. You can't tell me what to do. I'll make my own decisions.
Don't question,
And in the second scenario, we develop the wisdom of our unique family mindset and base our decisions on those. Which one of those 2 families is most likely to flourish 3 generations from today?
Beautiful thing about that is, or let me rather say the empowering thing about that is, like you always say, you cannot, or it would be a fool's errand as a futurist or anyone that's interested in futures to think that you can predict an outcome.
Sure.
It's about defining a spectrum of outcomes and working towards that. You'll end up somewhere within the bounds, right?
That's right.
But here's the thing. If you are not willing to do the work, it's wishful thinking, which is probably statistically way out of bounds with where you want to end up.
It is statistical because you've used frequently the phrase social system, and a family is a social system, and we say that social systems are probabilistic, not deterministic.
Yes, exactly.
In other words, it is about playing the odds.
Yes.
And you'd rather look into the soul of the thing. It's mind DNA. Understand what that is and use that to inform the decisions you make. You can still use many other methodologies and all kinds of financial monitoring and feasibility mechanisms. But I think the world of the mind is starting to become more and more interesting for large organizations all around the world, because they're starting to face problems that they have never faced before. There's a sense of the uniqueness of disruption that they're experiencing. And they need some kind of compass. And insight into the mind gives you that mindset intelligence for a world in flux, which you cannot have just using, as you suggested, the rules.
Exactly. And that's why I think your idea of flying blind is so eloquent and so on point. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
It really is. Morne, I think that we should also spend a minute on behavior as it is understood.
Yeah.
You cannot. I almost want to say there's no fast tracking this.
Sure.
So it's like you actually have to do the work. You cannot just say, as a family, we should behave in a way that is sort of growth orientated, or as a family, we should behave in a way that is, let's just be very real, respectful. If I come back to this, you cannot start decision making, you cannot start at behavior. It really requires a willingness to really interrogate what is my mindset around this. So you can't get away from doing the work.
It reminds me of a famous story of Mozart who conducts a symphony that he wrote himself. Just imagine attending that. And as he sort of, does the final tremendous crescendo, everyone applauds. He leaves the concert hall, and at the back of the hall is a member of the royal family. And, he says, Your Highness, what did you think of the symphony? And instead of just Your Highness just saying that was incredible, I mean, you're Mozart, he feels he should comment.
Oh, dear.
And he says, well, Herr Mozart, very, very good, but... if I have one comment to make, Herr Mozart said, please, go ahead. And he says, well, my only real problem is perhaps too many notes. Mozart is a little bit taken aback. He says, thank you so much, Your Highness, for the wonderful feedback. If I may ask, Your Highness, which notes should I remove?
Oh, well.
And I want to say the similar thing about mindset. You're absolutely right. It takes a little bit of work. But would you really have it without the notes? Would you really have it without the mindset? Would the symphony be the same?
Exactly.
Or would it be a little bit watered down? And I think those notes, and perhaps the artistry and the metaphorical power of the murmur and so on, it's so powerful to explain family, because it can sometimes be a little bit mysterious, like a dance. That affinity that you referred to earlier can also be found in the compatibility and the complementarity of mindsets.
Absolutely.
There's a beautiful concept that we learn from traditional African philosophy, which is its own vast field. But one of them is the idea of thinking of oneself as a good future ancestor. It's a fascinating play on time, to come back to an earlier concept of yours. So I'm living in the present. I live with consciousness of the power of the ancestors. But here's the fascinating thing. I live equally with consciousness that I myself, in the future, will be someone from the past. I will be aiming to be a good future ancestor. What's so powerful about that is it helps you to think of the family not just in one generation to the next, but, as you've often said, as a multi-generational continuum through time. And that means your role, your responsibility now as a decision maker in the family is paramount for that legacy.
Absolutely. And I almost want to say it's a very empowering realization to feel, and this is where it gets really interesting. Statistically, generations 2 and 3, it's improbable that they will achieve the same ground-up entrepreneurial success that Generation 1 did. It's statistically improbable, not impossible, but improbable. So how do I, as a working member of the firm, how do I experience dignity that I have made an equal contribution? And what you are saying is profound, because this almost allows a level of participation where you could have a equally big future contribution, because what you've done is your point of intervention has allowed for almost the development of a family consciousness
and the
ability to navigate the shift from, let's say, wealth creation objectives to wealth preservation objectives. And what you have if we just sort of very blunt about this, if the available data supports that Gs 2 and 3 will bleed out the portfolio, will draw down rather from the portfolio. If what you are enabling through, if one of the KPIs of pro-family behavior is enabling an additive culture where we are adding, and I as generation 2 or 3 have been instrumental in that shift, that's a game changer.
I really think it is, and it's fundamental to the very nature of social systems that they need continuous energy.
Yes.
So that that founder, the great founder of the legacy family, in most cases exerted incredible energy to elevate the family to that level. Now, as you correctly say, the probability is that energy declines. There's the entropy again. But there is an opportunity for Gen 2 and Gen 3 to say, how do I take some of the agency to inject some of the energy that sustains the life and legacy of this family? And wisdom around mindset is one way in which one can do that, because it is, of course, fluid over generations. It is dynamic, but that does not mean it's a free-for-all. So there's a tremendous leadership opportunity for Gen 2 and Gen 3 to ensure that powerful legacy continues.
And the potentially amazing thing about that is the fact that it speaks to worthy contribution. There's this topic floating around at the moment. It's a pain point in sort of next gen thinking of, this isn't mine. I didn't make this, so this isn't mine. And that in itself, I almost want to say, is you're proclaiming your alienation. And this plays out in guilt, in all kinds of things. But these are all sort of, I want to say, unhealthy imaginative states. What we're saying is, you've chosen to do something else. You went to go study something completely unrelated. You're 45 years old right now. I don't believe that it's ever too late to find a way within the system. Maybe you'll not be a working member of the firm. Maybe that's not how you contribute.
That's right.
But maybe there is a strategic role for you within the wider organization. Maybe you are part of redefining the future of the family enterprise. Maybe you are involved in understanding and navigating the mindset shift that will enable future decision-making and this continuation that you speak of.
It's so fascinating because we see the same phenomenon at that family level as we see at the macro level.
Exactly.
So, for example, there's a very similar sentiment. Climate change is one of my interests because of the long-term future impact on the planet. And there's, at the Club of Rome, for example, where I'm a member, there's very much this idea of intergenerational dialogue. And one of the reasons for that is that there are so many in the younger generation that have this exact sentiment that this isn't mine. This mess is not mine. I didn't make this. I didn't create this. I'm not to blame for it. Now, mindset is an interesting example of that. So strategically, with which mindset do you attack this? On the one hand, you could be off-the-chart stoic. And there's a fascinating curiosity about stoicism all around the world at the moment. There's a healthy way to be stoic. And then there's an off-the-chart nihilism about stoicism. In other words, it will all come to naught anyway. The disaster is imminent. It wasn't my fault, so you're to blame. And then I have a sort of escapism around it and an emotional scapegoat. But what's much more strategically valuable, as you've correctly pointed out, is that sense of agency to say, well, what contribution could I make given where I am now? We find the same thing in all organizations. There's a next generation of management, of top management, of executive committee leadership. They, in a certain sense, inherit the business from their predecessors, and they could argue, well, this is not mine. So the dilemma is that there's an opportunity for all of us to be active stewards of what we'd like the future to be. And that's the expectation dimension on mindset. And so if you start looking at these various dimensions in the mindset index and you start to combine them, they become quite fascinating. So if you, for example, combine a little bit of a communal orientation, much more pro-family, with the idea of altruism, which takes others into consideration, with the idea of at least a small degree of agency that I can start to play a role, with some sprinkling of what we call interventionism. In other words, where things are not quite going in the family the way they could or should, I think here is a place perhaps one should intervene. And you add to that dimensions of, let's say, a little bit of optimism.
Yes.
Of a positive expectation of the future of the family. You start to create a family mindset that is healthy, that is dynamic, that is resilient, that is robust in the face of hyperflux in the social context, and that means much more sustainability for the family.
Morne, and I think one of the key words there for me was dynamic. Family dynamics is fascinating, and it's something that we concern ourselves with almost exclusively in the study of, in our family governance research at SFO Research. But family dynamics is the area to look at. It is a discipline to explore. What I almost want to say is it still exists here.
Yeah.
The goal should be, and this is only something that we'd arrive at by developing pro-family behavior, is we want to be the dynamic family.
Yeah, right.
So this means we live and understand our dynamics.
Yeah.
If you really think about it, and this is something that I think is very important from an industry perspective, is there seems to be, when we talk next gen, there seems to be this shift to like the next generation, meaning out with the old, in with the new.
Yeah.
And that's something that I want to dispel, because I've got a serious problem with that. The only way this can work is by understanding that succession is a collaboration or requires collaboration. Something we've defined at SFO is our formula for that. And it's something that we call WE, literally WE. And what that stands for is the recognition of wisdom and energy being two vital components to navigate that kind of shift. And if you understand what that means, or what the function of we is, if you think about the knowledge transfer that is required, the mentorship, the wisdom component is there for guidance.
Yes.
That's the first generation. The energy combined with the wisdom, that is how we will arrive at, or that is how we will embark on a journey of succession.
I just love that because one of the dimensions in the Mindset Index, I mentioned one of the domains is knowledge processing. And there's a very, very interesting relationship between wisdom and knowledge. In a certain sense, one might say that wisdom is intuitive knowledge. It's automatic knowledge. It's unconscious competence.
Yes.
Now, on the Mindset Index, one of the continuum is this distinction in knowledge processing between what we call solipsism. It's a technical term. It just means that I think I know everything I need to know, essentially. If you're off the charts there, that's what it means. And I'm sure we've all got family members like that. They believe they know everything they need to know and no one can teach them anything. On the other side is what we've called altruism, which normally sounds like a philanthropy issue, but in this case is a knowledge issue. It means, what is the source of my knowledge? Is it just me? Or do I realize, in terms of my family mindset, that, for example, generation 1 is a source of a wealth of knowledge?
Exactly.
And you can literally, on the Mindset Index, define whether someone leans this way or this way. And this way is pro-me decision-making and behavior. This way is pro-family.
Morne, that's particularly insightful, this distinction between pro-me behavior and pro-family behavior. I am not a fan of idealized design because it is not, in a systems context, realistic.
Sure.
So we must always be realistic and practical in family governance. And having said that, we should understand that all families are not meant to stay together. What you typically have in multi-generational families is that there are branches of family. And as you would know, sort of, and again in systems language, that lends itself to sort of like emergent property, right? So it lends itself to the emergence of, if there was a primary culture, the development of these subcultures. It's entirely possible that this leads to a state of dysfunction, which is beyond repair.
Right.
So what happens in these scenarios is, and it's kind of a last resort, but it also speaks to agency, I suppose, is that the family enterprise is conducive and supports unbolting.
Right.
Unbolting there's all kinds of mechanisms around this. It doesn't just mean you unbolt, but there are appropriate processes around unbolting. This is a key focus area in our family governance research also. But in instances where we support and facilitate unbolting, it is important to understand that even that process, which would be a pro-me thing, pro-my branch of family, it's better for me to unbolt from this, is still done with a family mindset.
Yes, I think it's really paradoxical. Just for interest, there's some interesting links here to the Mindset Index. So one of the other dimensions, I said there were 24, one of the others in the Mindset Index is dogmatism and pragmatism. And the family dogma is the sort of the story.
Yes.
And the litany, as we sometimes say, and the pragmatism is how to make it work.
Yes.
So you're absolutely right that there's a delicate balance to be struck there in the mindset. And if you were to discover that a family might be overly dogmatic, then it would suffer consequences on the pragmatism.
Sure.
If, however, on the other hand, you were so pragmatic that you ignored the family belief system, then you would erode some of the family. And I would say there's a very, very interesting paradox and apparent contradiction in the way that systems behave, of which family is an example, as we've now established. And that is that that the nature of the interconnectedness in the system is not about tightness; it's about optimal connection. And so, if we unbolt, of course, I would argue that unbolt is first Industrial Revolution language, because it's about bolts and machinery.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Which are things that you can see and things that you can touch. But if you're doing that unbolting, in a sense, what happens is that there is an opportunity perhaps to flourish more. Now,
yes.
Now, back to the criticism of Mozart's symphony. If you only look at one dimension, it may seem anti or contra family, to use your language. But when you look at it holistically, it may in a circular way serve the family in the longer term.
Exactly.
In addition to that, just on the Mindset Index again, there are other dimensions such as conservatism and liberalism.
Yes.
And again, for the system to be healthy, you need a healthy balance there.
Exactly.
Conservatism in this regard is not about retaining everything, but it is about allowing the system to develop in such a way where it might have to give way.
Exactly.
In order to survive sustainably. And then another one, just finally from the Mindset Index, is protectionism and liberalism. And protectionism is that idea that I hold on tightly. Now, we know from much of the philosophy of Eastern mysticism that this idea of holding on to something that could harm you is ignorance.
Yes.
And so, again, I'm just illustrating with pragmatism, dogmatism, with conservatism, liberalism, with protectionism and protectionism, conservatism, and liberalism, that there are ways of defining that mindset for the family that can explain some of these strange behaviors that you might start to notice about the expanded members of the family.
These are very unique perspectives to interrogate this.
Exactly right.
But the key thing for me, and I think this is something that I have to circle back to in sort of all these avenues that we explore, is what is the purpose of this?
Yeah.
What is the point of this?
Yes.
And for me, it's very simple. All of this is so that the family may flourish. The point of all of this is the family must flourish.
Yes.
Now, flourish or to flourish means different things to different people.
Yeah.
But it's what this process that we've just defined today, I'm just going to come back to this to say this three-part process of family mindset, which informs decision-making, which results in pro-family behavior. The cumulative effect of this has to be to support families to flourish.
Yes. Flourish is just one of those beautiful English words.
Yeah.
And I often say that my own raison d'etre for doing this work, why I do this work in the first place, is that I want the good guys to win. And that's because I'm sick of the idiots winning. I've absolutely had enough of the idiots winning the day. And so there's often an easy distinction to be made. Those who are a little bit more discerning, a bit more nuanced, a bit more willing to consider.
Yes.
Those are often more sensitive. And the sensitive, and by that I don't mean hypersensitive or oversensitive, I mean sufficiently sensitive to the group, the system, the family. Those are often the good guys. And I want those guys to win. So, yes, you're absolutely right. The fundamental reason we're doing this in the first place is for the good guys to win. That's the goal. That's the strategic ultimate outcome. The Mindset Index just offers this insight.
Yes.
Without which we're really shooting randomly, driving in the dark, flying blind, and it's almost, you can think of it almost as sort of driving a car. You could say, well, I'm driving the car at night, and it's my car.
Yeah.
I've paid for this car. I own this car. I'm inside the car. What's all this switching on the lights nonsense? Looking on the outside. What's the point?
Exactly.
I mean, I own this car. It's mine.
Yeah.
But of course, you realize that by not doing that, you expose yourself to so much risk that you put this precious thing, which is yours, at an enormous risk.
Absolutely.
And it means it's not sustainable.
Morne, and I'm very glad that you touched on sustainability there, because again, to go macro, the available data says that 70% of wealth transfers are projected to fail. So we can't continue to behave how we are behaving.
That's right.
And expecting a different outcome.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to this three-part process. I really want to emphasize the behavioral aspect of that. And I want to say, if we are expecting pro-family behavior, which will result in giving families a better chance of being sustainable, we need to interrogate our decision-making, but we need to understand that will remain sort of circular reasoning.
That's right, yeah.
If we are not able to appropriately, as you've defined with Mindset Index, define or rethink family mindset.
You're exactly right. And there is a kind of positive and a negative circularity to that. Because let's say that you don't define the family mindset, you now make decisions in the dark, you're flying blind, and the result is that you have contra-family behavior. That contra-family behavior now kicks off a new cycle. It gives you a certain experience. You still don't have any data on the family mindset. You make reactive decisions.
Yes.
Without that wisdom, and that gives you reinforcing negative contra-family behavior. The opposite cycle, the virtuous cycle, is also true. Gain the insight from the family mindset, make pro-family decisions, and the outcome is pro-family behavior. The circle really does work in a vicious as well as virtuous way.
Morne, as always, it's incredibly profound having these conversations with you. I think this work is not only interesting, but it's necessary. And we've got a responsibility to really drive the development of family mindset if we hope to positively influence family behavior as a key consideration in family strategy going forward. And to bring this right home, the relevance of this work, we have the macroeconomic data on this. It is truly, truly, truly necessary work. So I thank you for joining me today, and I'm sure our viewers can derive a lot of value from what was discussed today. Your insights and work in mindset is something that I am following closely, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Harris, it's been an absolute pleasure spending this time with you. The stakes couldn't be higher. The greatest wealth transfer in the 250,000-year history of humanity, with science developing so rapidly in insights and decision-making, with the critical and dominant role that families still play around the world. Perhaps Churchill was right after all when he said, the empires of the future are the empires of the mind. And the Mindset Index helps us now for the first time to gain insight into what a family mindset might be. It's been a pleasure spending time with you.
Morne, thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in this evening. That's all from us. I hope you enjoyed the discussion around family mindset as much as I did. It's always good to engage with my friend and colleague, Dr. Morne Mostert. Financial markets close at 5 p.m. Night markets open at 6. Let's start the conversation.